Hello and welcome to another episode of the Investor Financing Podcast. And I'm your host, Beau Eckstein. And today we're going to talk all about cost segregation, how to save money on your taxes. We're going to learn about what to look for, some rules of thumb, some general overviews of all about cost segregation. I know many of the listeners out there and viewers are buying Airbnb type properties. So we had a CPA on last week that talked about the loophole for short-term rental investors that don't necessarily qualify for reps, which is the real estate professional status for your taxes. So cost segregation is an amazing tool for real estate investors to at least understand the concepts, to potentially offset some of your earned income and your tax consequences. So please welcome to the show, Yonah Weiss. Yonah is a powerhouse with property owners' tax savings. As business director of Madison SPECS, a national cost segregation leader, he has assisted clients in saving tens of millions of dollars on taxes through cost segregation. He has a background in teaching and a passion for real estate and helping others. He's a real estate investor and host of the top podcast, Weiss Advice. Okay, so welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Beau. Thank you so much for having me on.
And we haven't really officially met other than when you just came on the show. But I would say one thing about you that I've noticed about you is you are an extremely good networker and marketer. Because if you don't know who you are and you're in the real estate industry, you're probably not anywhere, because I see you everywhere, all over LinkedIn. You do an amazing job of connecting with people. And I think, as real estate investors, you should take note of what Yonah is doing, because we should all be doing the same thing. It's a great way to grow your business, whether you're a real estate broker, a lender, you're in cost segregation. It's all about people and networking, and you do a fantastic job of that. So I just want to congratulate you on being so good at what you do in the business development space and marketing and education platform. So thanks for joining us. Why don't we just dive in and just many people watching and listening to this in the future probably don't know what cost segregation is. It's starting to become more popular as there's more podcasts talking about it and so forth. But can you break down what cost segregation is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope I've helped to shed some light on that, popularizing this topic. I've been a guest on now probably over 300 podcasts. And so it's a great topic. If you haven't heard of it before, essentially it's a form of depreciation. And so when you buy a property, whether it's a rental property, investment property, business property, besides for your personal residence, the IRS allows you to take a tax deduction, income tax write-off of the purchase price, however much money was spent. Okay, you have to subtract a small amount for land, which does not depreciate, but the remainder you can literally write off. Okay, but you only are allowed to do this over a long period of time. So for commercial property, it's over a 39-year period, and for residential properties, including multifamily, over a 27.5-year period. Now, those numbers are kind of arbitrary, but that depreciation schedule begins the day that you buy the property or the day you place it in service, meaning getting it ready to be a rental. So even if the property was built, in 1925, you can start the depreciation of it from when you buy it, which leads me to, just clarify that it's really a borrowed term. Don't be confused by the name depreciation, because your property is not going down in value. It's literally just a tax deduction that has the name of depreciation. The IRS allows you to write off like the devaluation of the property, so to speak, as if it's going down in value. But again, that starts over every time there's a new transaction. So it is kind of it's an arbitrary thing there. So that's what depreciation is, which allows you to take, a sizable deduction, about 2 to 3% of the property value every single year. Well, that's great. And that can certainly help to reduce your taxable income. However, there's this thing called cost segregation, which is a really weird name. Essentially what it means is component depreciation. We're going to break down the property into its individual components, and some of those features, some of those assets inside of a property can actually depreciate faster, meaning you can take a portion of the total value and take it as a tax write-off at a faster rate. So essentially, that's what we're doing. We're breaking down the property from an engineering perspective, and from the structural components, which depreciate on those longer 27.5 or 39-year schedules, and bringing out other components or identifying the value of personal property like appliances, furniture, fixtures, carpeting, cabinets, basically anything that's non-structural inside the property. And there's over a dozen categories of what those components can be. And once we identify what those things are, you can now take the value of that as a tax write-off at a faster rate.
And then does it depend on what items on as far as now when we I guess the next question is we get the depreciation over the long term, but now we're going to talk about accelerating the depreciation. And when we accelerate the depreciation, and in 2022, I think this is the last year for bonus depreciation, although it might get extended. So if we do the cost segregation study, essentially that's going to break down the components, if I heard you correctly. And then certain components you can accelerate the depreciation on certain components. And by doing that, you can take a larger paper loss year 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. Is that accurate?
That's correct. So what we're doing, again, we're allocating the cost or the value into different components, and those components can depreciate faster. So yes, once we've done the cost segregation and said, hey, all those interior items or all those personal properties depreciate on a 5-year schedule, you're able to take the value of that. Sometimes it can be up to 20 or 30% of the total value of the property can be in those 5-year assets. You can take that as a depreciation write-off over a 5-year period. And as you mentioned, there's something called bonus depreciation, which is an option. Once you've done the cost segregation, you're allowed to take that entire 5-year and also other 7 or 15-year assets, basically things that depreciate on a faster rate. You're able to take that lump sum in the first year. And it's been around since the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the tax reform, and it was set in the books to start to expire or phase out starting in 2023. So this year, 2022, is the last year that we're able to take 100% of that bonus depreciation, not extra depreciation, but the accelerated amounts of depreciation in the first year. So if you'd like, I can illustrate just to throw out some numbers so people can kind of grasp that concept.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so let's take just an example. Let's say you buy a property for $1 million. Okay, we'll try to use as round numbers as possible. As I mentioned before, you're always going to allocate a certain amount for land, which does not depreciate. Let's say it's 15%. That's a pretty national average. There are certain locations, and it does really depend on location more than anything else, that are higher land values. Like California is notorious for having like extremely high land values. But let's say 15%, which leaves you with, from $1 million, taking off 15%, you're left with $850,000. That's what's called your tax basis or your depreciable basis. That's the amount you can take and spread out over a 27.5-year period, right? So if you divide that by 27.5, you're equal approximately about $30,000. That means that's your depreciation deduction if you did normal depreciation. But let's say you're able to take 25% of that depreciation in the first year, in the first 5 years, which again, you have the option to take that up front in the first year. That means instead of $30,000 of tax write-offs every single year, what you're able to do is literally have, just doing my calculator, about $212,000 of extra depreciation in those first 5 years, which means, all right, divide that by 5, 42,000. So essentially you have multiplied and increased your depreciation deduction by more than 2, right? So instead of 30,000, you're looking at over $70,000 of deductions over those first 5 years, each year. And you have the option with bonus depreciation to take that 212,000 in the first year, which is like a huge lump sum tax write-off. And again, if you can use this is probably the best strategy out there to increase your cash flow and have more money to reinvest.
And that's a good point. So obviously, people, you need to consult with your CPAs and tax attorneys on how it is going to affect your tax situation. Like if you're a real estate, deemed a real estate professional, if you have that, spend enough time in real estate and spend those hours and qualify. But if you're trying to offset, per se, your earned income and don't have those destinations, you might not be able, it might not be worth it for you to take the bonus depreciation. You might want to extend it out because you don't need that 212,000 write-off the year one. So you always got to know that. But if you're a real estate professional, for example, I have a very good friend who's a multifamily syndicator, and he makes millions of dollars a year, but he laughs because he depreciates everything and does cost segregations and literally pays no taxes. So if you look at all these really successful multifamily and commercial property owners, they're typically using this strategy because they're real estate professionals, they can offset all of their income pretty much. So it's a fantastic tool, and you can actually plan. Like I have a friend that's getting a big lump of money, and potentially because he's not a real estate professional. And this is kind of bringing us to the next topic, is you're seeing that people aren't just doing this on per se commercial property. They're also able to do cost segregation studies on their vacation rental properties that they're running on Airbnb. And there is some, people say loophole. I don't know if we say a loophole in the tax code, but there are some ways that if you're not a real estate professional, you could enjoy the benefits of the cost segregation study. And you guys can go back. I'll link to that video somewhere here where we talk to a CPA, and that's who you should get your tax information from, somebody licensed to qualify. This is for educational purposes. But my friend, who was not deemed a real estate professional, bought 5 properties this year, which are all Airbnb, and he materially participated, which that triggers allowing him to actually utilize the
depreciation.
The depreciation. Exactly. So he had like 400,000 in year one write-offs, which offset his $400,000 earned income. So
right.
It's like the most amazing tool. And it blows my mind that so many people don't know about this. And this is why I guess we do these podcast shows, everybody. But so Yonah, are you seeing a lot of people now that maybe that aren't real estate professionals, but they get this loophole? So now they're going in and buying these Airbnb type properties for obviously the cash flow, but they're seeing the huge 30% savings on taxes or whatever that number is. Are you seeing a huge surge in that market?
A huge surge. Yeah. Over the past, I'd say, year and a half, it's really taken off. I attribute a lot of that to Avery Carl and her team at the Short-Term Shop. And she was featured on the Bigger Pockets podcast and wrote a book for Bigger Pockets called Short-Term Rentals, Long-Term Wealth. And, they were the biggest vacation rental brokerage, EXP, in the country. And so they have over 1,000 clients. And so I think they've helped to spread the word about that a lot. But I've seen a tremendous amount of people getting involved in, especially given that if you're not a real estate professional, you are able to only use the depreciation to offset any rental income or passive income you have. This is a great loophole, if you want to call it that allows you to use this against earned income or active or W-2 income. You don't need to be a real estate professional to take advantage of this.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just think this is the best thing since sliced bread, because it doesn't matter how much money you make, it's how much you keep in your pocket at the end of the day. Right. I'd rather make less money and keep more. And also buy cash flowing assets, which is extremely important, like these. So that's a great. So at what point would we do a formal study on like a single family property? Like, does the property typically, like a purchase price of 500,000 and more, make sense? Or could you do collectively a couple properties, or is there like short form? Do you need a physical engineering inspection? I mean, obviously, what are the recommendations on these smaller assets, but you want to take advantage of cost segregation?
Absolutely. So my general rule of thumb is, for any property over $500,000 purchase price, it's basically a no-brainer. And we always run a free estimate beforehand, so everyone can see what the numbers are, what they can potentially be in terms of the tax savings. But over $500,000, 500,000, it's almost a no-brainer. There's so much value in that. But on smaller properties, I've seen as well, especially if it's an Airbnb and you're able to use those tax deductions against ordinary income, or you're a real estate professional and you're able to use that. I'd say anywhere over $200,000 or $250,000 purchase price, you're going to see benefit there. It needs to be done on every individual property, meaning the IRS is going to depreciate, or you're going to have to depreciate every property separately. And especially given the cost segregation, what we're doing is breaking down the property. And so every property is built differently, and everything has, built in a different year, has different construction in it, et cetera. So the only way that you could combine a number of single families, for example, together as one is if they were literally like built together in one development, or that they were like all in close proximity and were one purchase price, and you're actually just going to be depreciating them all together on one schedule as a portfolio. So there is an option in that, but otherwise a study needs to be done on every single one. You asked about the physical inspection. It needs to be an inspection done to the property. However, we transitioned, instead of sending our engineers to the property in person, which we did for 15 years. That was our business model. With the onset of COVID a couple of years ago, we transitioned to doing a lot of those virtually. We will still send our engineers to larger commercial buildings and things where we need like a very detailed inspection, but for single families and even multifamilies where you only need to go into one of each unit type. Okay. So if you have a 200 unit apartment building, but you only have 3 unit layouts, so the engineer will only need to go in and see 3 of those samples and then apply the rest, as well as any common areas. So we do that through a virtual site tour, which means we'll have our engineers on a video call with someone on site, like a property manager or someone, a maintenance person, someone who can just walk them through the property. We'll record that and then take the data and build the report from that as if they were there.
That makes sense.
You're listening to the Investor Financing Podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Beau Eckstein, host of the Investor Financing Podcast. I appreciate you checking out our channel. On this podcast, we talk about real estate, investing, financing, business lending, and acquiring and expanding your business. I'm sure you will find some videos here that will help you build your business empire. There's a lot to see. Take your time and make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks again. My question is other than multifamily, single family, pretty much any kind of commercial property, is there certain food groups that are kind of better for cost segregation than others?
There certainly are. I mean, all properties are going to be beneficial regardless. Some have more of that personal property or land improvements, which depreciate on a 15-year schedule. Some have that more than others. I would say on average, a multifamily property will have around 20 to 25% of that value that you can depreciate at a faster rate. Certain types of Airbnbs may have upwards of 30% because you have more of that personal property. Retail, office, industrial. Industrial is probably on the lower end. Warehouses would probably be on the lower end because there's not a lot in there. You're looking at just structural things, maybe some shelving and things like that. And then the land improvements, again, will be a majority there. But the largest one, and I think the one that kind of is an anomaly, are mobile home parks, our mobile home communities, or RV parks, because essentially what you're buying is just the land, which doesn't depreciate, but the land improvements, meaning the concrete, the landscaping, the pavement, fencing, anything out there, that all has value on a 15-year schedule. And essentially, especially if you're not buying any of the homes themselves, you're just buying, right, the concrete pads that are underneath the home, et cetera. All you're getting is the land, again, doesn't depreciate, but the value of what you're buying, the majority is going to be in those land improvements. Now, land improvements depreciate on a 15-year schedule, which are eligible for bonus depreciation. So what I'm seeing for mobile home parks is literally somewhere between 50 to 80% of the purchase price can be allocated to bonus depreciation.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting. Now, another question that came to my mind, which I think is interesting. A lot of investors do what we call value add. They buy something that needs a lot of work. So let's just use a hypothetical 200 unit apartment complex. They're buying this for $20 million. And they have a CapEx budget of $5 million. Can you do like in phases? Could they get the study done at acquisition, and then would you then do it then when CapEx is complete? How would that work?
Yeah. So when we do in the cost segregation, the first thing we're doing is really looking at the purchase price. And that's essentially what it is. We're breaking down that purchase price into the property into its different categories and its different components, because you don't know unless you're doing a brand new construction, you don't know how much the value of the cabinets are when it's included in the whole purchase price. So that's the purpose of the cost segregation. However, when you're going to do a major value add and not do a gut renovation, but let's just say adding things up, right? Doing a renovation at a later point, you're able to get the benefit in a double way, meaning you're able to get the cost segregation on the purchase in that first year. And then in a subsequent year, if you do renovations, that $5 million CapEx budget, like you mentioned, you can go ahead and depreciate that as well. And a lot of those assets that you're going to be updating will probably be in those faster depreciation categories. For example, if you're updating, cabinets, countertops, flooring, also all kind of stuff like that, all of that, or appliances, that will all go into the faster depreciation schedule. So yeah, you can kind of double dip when it comes to renovations.
And so when we're getting these paper losses on our K1s, et cetera, at some point we have to recapture these paper losses.
Let's talk about recapture. It's something that a lot of people are confused about. And so I would love to clarify that. You hear this a lot, people, you have to recapture those losses. What recapture tax? And so just kind of rephrasing it there, because it doesn't mean recapture does not mean that you pay back the depreciation. What it does mean is that when you sell a property, you are subject to a capital gain tax, which we're familiar with, right? If you made a profit, but there's also what's called depreciation recapture tax, which is also considered an unrealized gain. Okay. You've reduce your basis over time, you are subject to a tax on the amount of depreciation that you took. So it does not mean you're paying back depreciation, but what it does mean is that if you take more depreciation in the earlier years, you're going to be subject to a larger tax bill on the sale. What a lot of people don't know is that you can defer that tax with the 1031 exchange as well as the capital gain tax. So there are strategies around that, as well as if you have any passive losses from a cost segregation in the year of the sale from another property, we like to call it like a lazy 1031. You can actually use those losses to offset the recapture tax. So it's not something that is set in stone, that is something you have to pay back. It's just a tax you are subject to. And like other taxes, if you're doing it right, you can use the strategies to never have to pay that. So get the time value of money, which is using the depreciation deductions now, today, when it's actually worth something in your pocket today. And we know from inflation, it's worth a lot more than we can actually even imagine. I mean, think about it. They're, recently put out 7.5% inflation over the past year. That means by you having your own cash and not paying Uncle Sam, if you're not obligated to, and using that, you literally just saving 7% on your own money. Regardless, if you're a smart investor, you'll actually use that money to reinvest and make more money on it.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like a no-brainer, really. And I think this is so important. And that's why I do this podcast, is to bring on great guests and educate the people out there, because like you should be investigating these things, because essentially if you're going to have a really good income year, how can you offset that good income year, right? You can potentially go buy a vacation rental property that you're going to materially participate in, and you might be able to really enjoy these cost segregations. So it's just like, it just amazes me every day. I run into people that just they won't spend the time to listen and learn and like apply these. And the beautiful thing is the recapture tax isn't really anything to be worried about, because essentially if you're in this for the long run, you're going to learn that you can 1031 exchange, you can keep deferring. And then, at the end of your life, it doesn't really matter. Or, obviously you're going to maybe pass the properties on, but essentially there's steps to minimize and never really have to, you can keep deferring forever almost. So it's an amazing tool that more people should use. And I think over recent years, like I remember years ago when I started in real estate investing, I never heard cost segregation. Now it's becoming like the buzzword. Everybody is starting to get it. Like, why wouldn't you look at doing this? And what I like about it is they can actually call you, and they can fill out a little form probably, and you can give them like a quick estimate of this is what you can expect. And then they can get their tax person on the phone with your group and talk about everything. And then the client or the candidate can say, oh, I can save $200,000 of tax consequences this year by doing this. So it's something you can forecast, and you can see. There's not really any hidden variables. If you have your tax person there, you have the cost segregation engineering person there, you're going to know pretty close what you can actually write off against your earned income, depending on how you qualify. So it's really like a tool that everybody should be using. So it's really, you don't really have to sell your service, really. It's really just educating people.
It's education.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's what I love about it. I mean, it's really just education, which kind of, for me, being an educator, having a teaching background, just made it fit like a glove. You're just teaching people about this.
So you were a teacher beforehand and teaching like high school, elementary. What did you teach?
So I taught many different phases. Wow, it's kind of hard to go back. We're like 15, 20 years, but the majority of what I did was actually like postgraduate type teaching in yeshiva, is higher education, like Jewish education. So most people like post-college or post-high school, college age people.
Very cool. Very cool. And what do you like to invest in? I know you'd like to invest. Are you a multifamily investor, or you do duplexes, fourplexes? What's your cup of tea?
So I transitioned. I did a bunch of fix and flips for a while. I didn't like that. Mostly what I've been focusing on the past couple of years is in larger multifamily deals, but not on my own, really with partners, kind of passively investing or joint venturing with people. So larger multifamily and self-storage, those are really my two main focuses.
And what's your outlook with the economy? And I know you don't have a crystal ball, inflation, but you're in the mix. You're talking to other investors. It seems like people are still very bullish in real estate. It just, interest rates are ticking up. We got inflation going. Are you still actively buying right now, or are you on the sidelines?
Absolutely, still looking for deals all the time, every day.
Because some people don't necessarily need to buy for cash flow. They're buying for tax write-offs too, right? Like that's like it doesn't necessarily.
100%.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons. I mean, there are so many factors that can make a deal a good deal. Cash flow is not the only factor, but if you work hard enough and look hard enough, you can find still, even to this day, good cash flowing deals.
That's true. And tell us about your podcast. How long you've been doing it, and what do you talk about on your show?
So Weiss Advice was kind of, it was born out of me being a guest on over 200 podcasts, or at that point, maybe over 100 podcasts. I've been doing it for close to 2 years now. When we launched it, over 200 episodes. And I just love talking to successful people. I'd say 95% or even more of the people that I interview are people that I know already, clients of mine or investors or people that I work with. And so it's really just a sit down conversation about usually real estate, business, life in general. It really varies from topic to topic. We don't really cover specific topics like this. Like we wouldn't have an episode on the educating, about cost segregation or any specific topics like that. It really is just more kind of to get to know people and have a great conversation. So that's the premise of it. And I enjoy it. And that's really why I keep doing it.
Well, that's good. It's all about enjoying what you're doing. And I could see you're enjoying it. And I do, once again, congratulate you on your success, and just staying, being top of mind for people is critical. I think you were doing like challenges on LinkedIn and things like that. And I like that. I was like, it's just the power of social media and networking is just amazing. So anybody out there that's not out there putting themselves out there, and you want to improve in some way, right? Like I am not the best speaker, and doing a podcast or YouTube channel is difficult for me. Mm-hmm. But when I was in school, I would get nervous. I was the one getting nervous, getting up when I had to talk in front of the class. But you do start doing this enough, and then you just realize, listen, I'm going to say and but too much, but we can edit that out. But you have to just put yourself out there to really grow and excel, and
right.
and also give back to people too. Like if I can bring you on my show, and now somebody out there goes, whoa, I didn't know about cost segregation. This is the best thing I've ever seen. And it's going to save me a couple $100,000. Like my friend, he was sending me because I told him he should do cost segregation, and he did, and he saved $200,000 or $300,000 this year in taxes. And the guy loves me now. Like he loved me before, but I mean, it's good to be able to have those connections where you can really help people. And that's what we do, really, is we help people. I help people finance properties and grow their portfolio. But I'm a point of contact for them where it's like, hey, have you thought about doing cost segregation? Have you thought about doing this? Like, because I am in the space and I see it every day, and I see the really successful people. What are they doing? Right.
That's right.
Success leaves clues. So what do you do for personal development?
Personal development is really, I have 6 kids, so that keeps me on my toes all the time. But, I still study and I read a lot of, scripture and ancient texts, so I'm doing a lot of introspection, a lot of praying and meditation, that kind of stuff. So that's really my personal development on a daily basis, from the inside out. And, recognizing, God in the world is really, that's my whole being. And so every single interaction that I have is really, that's what it's about. So it may not come out on the outside all too much, because I kind of keep it internal, but really that's my focus. And so how I can bring out the best in others and help other people, that's really what it's all about. I mean, that's what life is about. So I focus on that every single day and hopefully try to fulfill it.
That's awesome. Well, you seem like a super happy-go-lucky guy and definitely knowledgeable, and really appreciate your time on the show. Where can people that are interested in cost segregation, where can they connect with you so they can ask questions and get engaged with you?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I'm extremely active on LinkedIn. I'd say that's my most active social media platform, although I'm on pretty much all of them. You can also go to yonahweiss.com if you want to learn more about cost segregation and our company, Madison SPECS.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you, and thanks for taking the time with us. And went a little bit longer than I said, but it always does. And you have a great day. And everybody watching, please do me a favor and like and subscribe so we can keep growing this channel and platform and bring on other guests that can educate us in many different ways so we can grow our real estate investing businesses and live a happy-go-lucky life. Thanks, guys.